It all happened shortly after I turned 15 years old. As a birthday gift, my parents had given me a PS5, along with my own monitor allowing me to play in my room. My room was upstairs, and in the weeks following my birthday, I naturally spent a lot of time up there. One Saturday night, I was chatting in a party with two of my school friends. Both of my parents were out of town for a work convention, so I was home alone. I had my headphone volume turned up pretty loud, but during a pause in our conversation, I heard a thumping sound coming from downstairs. If you've ever been home alone as a kid, you know how any unusual noise makes your imagination run wild. I turned down the volume and took one headphone off my ear. Nothing happened for the next 5 minutes, but soon after, I heard the noise again. I told my friends about it, and they jokingly encouraged me to check it out, saying someone might have broken in. I laughed it off, but agreed to do it during the next break in our game. When that moment came, I took off my headphones and started walking toward the stairs. As I descended, I began to hear soft whispering. I froze, straining to understand whether I was really hearing it or just imagining it. I crouched down to get a look into the living room, and to my horror, I saw 4 fully grown men, all dressed in black, silently moving around. I couldn't process what I was seeing, but one thing was clear. I had to get back upstairs. I slowly started to retreat, but as I did, one of the steps let out a loud creak that echoed through the house. There was no way they didn't hear it. Thinking quickly, I ran to my room and told my friends to call the police. They sounded confused, but in a serious tone, they asked what was going on. I felt I didn't have time to explain, so I just told them to hurry and threw my headset onto my desk. I knew that locking myself in my room would signal that I was inside, but I still locked the door and closed it behind me. Instead, I hid in the bathroom with the light off, leaving the door slightly ajar so they wouldn't think to check there. I could hear multiple sets of boots slowly walking up the stairs. The sound grew louder until I heard banging on my bedroom door. This was no gentle knocking. Whoever was doing it clearly intended to break it down. Voices yelled out, demanding that I open the door or face consequences. I was absolutely horrified. I got up and desperately tried to open the bathroom window. Just as the last bit of the window opened, I made too much noise. A set of boots started heading down the hall just as the bathroom door swung open. I managed to dive out headfirst. I landed awkwardly on my neck, but quickly looked back up at the bathroom window where a silhouette stood motionless, staring at me. Suddenly, the back door slid open, and 3 men came running toward me. I tried to get up and run, but I wasn't quick enough. They grabbed me and started pulling me back toward the house. But just then, the distant sound of police sirens filled the air. The 3 men exchanged glances, then sprinted toward the backyard fence and climbed over it. I never saw them again. A few moments later, the police arrived in the backyard. I told them which way the men had gone, and a couple of officers chased after them while one stayed with me. The only man caught that night was the one inside the house. The other 3 were never found. As the police asked me questions, my 2 friends pulled into the driveway on their bikes. To this day, I routinely thank them for calling the cops, as it likely saved my life. Left behind in the house were 4 different knives and a couple of fully loaded pistols. It was the middle of summer, and I was 10 years old while my younger brother was 7. We were outside playing various games with other kids in our neighborhood, but when the sun went down, we headed home. Occasionally, our parents would go out to a restaurant, leaving my brother and me home alone. They would usually tell us beforehand, but if we were outside playing, sometimes we'd return to find the house empty. That night, we found a note left on the kitchen counter confirming our parents had gone out. My brother and I headed to the living room to watch TV, which was our usual pre-bedtime routine. About half an hour later, it was completely dark outside when I heard the doorbell ring, followed by knocking. At first, I thought it was our parents returning, but it was unusual for them to use the front door, much less forget their key. The chances of the garage door opener malfunctioning and them forgetting a key were extremely low. Still, I want to check it out. As I approached the door, I heard a man's voice yelling that he was selling Girl Scout cookies. I was confused because it was late and unexpected. I looked through the peephole and saw a grown man alone, without any cookies and not accompanied by a child. The man called out again, moving his hand toward the door handle. My heart dropped as I realized we hadn't locked the door when coming in for the night. The handle slowly began to turn, and I quickly engaged the deadbolt. The clicking sound echoed loudly, clearly alerting the man that someone was inside. I waited a minute and then looked through the peephole again. To my horror, the man was now staring through our living room window directly at my younger brother, who was completely unaware of the situation. I could see a gun holstered on his left side. I rushed back to the living room and told my brother we should go downstairs for some ice cream, hoping to get him away from the windows. I knew if he understood what was happening, he would panic. He agreed, and we headed downstairs. I silently locked the basement door behind us. We ate our ice cream while I listened for any sounds from upstairs. Eventually, I heard the garage door opening, signaling that my parents had returned home. Later, when my brother wasn't around, I told my parents what had happened. They were horrified and called the police. Officers came to inspect the house, and one of the first things they noticed was that the front door's lock had clearly been tampered with, confirming the man had ill intentions and was trying to break in. To this day, my younger brother has no idea that this event occurred. As a kid, I lived deep in the countryside on a family-owned farm, with a dirt road leading up to our farmhouse. I was 16 at the time, and it was getting close to midnight one particular night when I was home alone. I was sitting on our couch in the living room, watching a movie with Bear, our family dog. Bear was getting old and wasn't very active anymore, so he could easily sit through a whole movie beside me. During one of the quieter parts of the film, Bear's ears suddenly perked up and he turned his head toward the front door. I muted the TV, but I couldn't hear anything. Bear stayed completely focused in that direction. My first instinct was to assume someone was at the door, but that didn't make much sense given how remote our location was. We rarely had unexpected visitors. I brushed it off as just an animal and turned the TV volume back up. Shortly after, Bear started growling quietly, still fixated on the door. In all the time I had known him, I had heard him growl maybe twice before. By this point, I figured I needed to check it out, so I grabbed one of our family's guns and walked to the front door. I opened it but saw nothing, so I walked outside. I got about 30 yards from the porch, peering into the night's black emptiness. Just as I turned to head back, I noticed a man sitting on the edge of the deck in the fetal position, seemingly trying to hide himself. I froze, unsure of what to do. I wasn't about to walk up to him. As quietly as I could, I went around to the back door, which was unlocked because we never worried about locking our doors out there. Once inside, I quickly ran to the front door, shut it and locked it. I did the same with all the windows and doors around the house before calling the police. They took about 30 minutes to arrive. After a thorough search of the property, the officers found nothing. I felt somewhat relieved, but also started to think maybe I had imagined it. After the police left, I decided to go to bed. The next morning, as I headed down to the kitchen to make breakfast, I noticed one of the knives was missing. I had a sinking feeling in my stomach. I called the police again, and 2 officers arrived to search the house. I waited outside while they conducted their search. A few minutes later, they came back out, leading an old, scrawny-looking man in handcuffs. He had been found hiding under the basement stairs, clutching the knife that had gone missing from my kitchen. After I explained the situation, the police believed he had likely entered through the front door while I was outside. When questioned, the man said nothing about what he was doing out there or what his intentions were. The fact that he had grabbed a knife didn't bode well.